He was only 12 years old, but that morning, Ethan saw something no one else did, a danger lurking right under the CEO's nose. As he stopped Samuel Hayes from getting into his car, warning him of a potential threat, no one took him seriously. After all, what could a janitor's son possibly know about corporate conspiracies? But when the bomb was discovered just moments later, everything changed. Ethan's quiet observations, made from years of watching the company's every move, saved a life, and exposed the deadly plot that no one saw coming. What happened next shocked the entire company. But the question is, how many more voices are being ignored because they're invisible? Keep watching to find out how a single act of courage turned the tables on a powerful conspiracy. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Marcus, a 28-year-old software engineer, wrapped up his shift at a tech company in the heart of the city. As he closed his laptop, the sound of the keys clicking shut echoed in the quiet office. He was used to these long hours, always staying late to finish a project or fix a bug. It had become routine: work, go home, eat, sleep, repeat. He grabbed his jacket, slinging it over his shoulder as he stepped out into the crisp evening air. The streets were buzzing with the usual after-work crowd, commuters catching trains, people chatting as they walked by, and the distant hum of car engines in the background. Marcus adjusted his earbuds, lost in his playlist, thinking about what he'd do when he got home. Maybe watch some Netflix, maybe catch up on a podcast, nothing out of the ordinary. But as he passed the usual coffee shop on the corner, he felt a sudden, unsettling stare. A car had slowed down beside him. Marcus glanced over, but the driver quickly looked away. He didn't think much of it at first, dismissing it as just another passerby. Yet there was something about the car, something in the air that felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. What Marcus didn't know as he kept walking, oblivious to the looming threat, was that this seemingly ordinary evening would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, about the world, and about the color of his skin. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As he continued down the street, the car remained at his side, moving at the same pace. It wasn't speeding up or slowing down, just lingering, a shadow in his peripheral vision. He quickened his pace, glancing nervously at the driver, just a man, white, wearing sunglasses, not giving any sign of recognition. Still, the car followed. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. This wasn't normal. He turned a corner sharply, hoping to lose the car. But it followed. Slowly. Methodically. That creeping sensation in his gut told him this wasn't some harmless coincidence. He reached for his phone, but before he could unlock it, a voice called out, sharp and demanding. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Marcus froze. His heart pounded in his chest. What was this about? His mind raced. Could it be a misunderstanding? Maybe the driver needed directions. But the tone of the voice, the urgency, it felt wrong. He turned, forcing himself to take a deep breath, trying to look calm, trying not to show the panic building inside him. He looked at the man, now standing outside of the car, staring at him with an unsettling intensity. The man was tall, middle-aged, his stance rigid and authoritarian. Marcus swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, awkward and tense. "You're out here, walking the streets late at night," the man said, his voice tight with accusation. "I've seen you before. What's your name?" Marcus's stomach turned. This wasn't just some random encounter. It wasn't just about directions. The man's words were loaded with suspicion, as if Marcus had done something wrong by simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm just heading home from work," Marcus said, his voice shaky now. He felt the weight of the man's gaze studying him, judging him. "It's no big deal." But the man wasn't listening. "No big deal? You don't belong here, do you?" The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He felt a rush of heat rise to his face, a mix of anger and humiliation. He didn't belong here? He was just a guy, going home from a job, doing the same thing he had done every other day. But it wasn't that simple, was it? The color of his skin made it complicated. Made him dangerous in the eyes of this stranger. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, to explain how ridiculous this was, but the man wasn't done. People like you don't belong in places like this. Marcus's blood ran cold. People like you. The words echoed in his mind. He had heard them before, in quieter moments, from people who never saw him as more than an outsider. It wasn't just one man, it was the world. I'm just trying to get home, Marcus said, voice trembling, but this time with a fury he couldn't contain. This is my city. I live here. I work here. The man didn't flinch. His gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing. You think just because you have a job you're one of them? The man's lip curled in a sneer. People like you don't get to live here. Don't get to walk these streets like you own them. Marcus stepped back, a chill crawling up his spine. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. His mind raced, thoughts spinning. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. The man moved toward him, his body language menacing, like a predator closing in on its prey. Marcus's feet felt like they were stuck in concrete, his body frozen in place. Then the sirens wailed. Marcus's heart skipped a beat, and the man's face faltered for a split second. But the moment passed quickly, and the man looked at him once more with contempt. You should leave now, he sneered. Before things get worse for you. Marcus didn't wait another second. He turned and walked away, his steps faster now, his pulse hammering in his ears. The man called after him again, but Marcus didn't look back. His mind was fogged with anger, confusion, disbelief. What just happened? As he walked, he replayed the encounter over and over in his head, every word, every glance, every moment of that horrific exchange. The reality hit him like a ton of bricks. He had been targeted, judged, and dismissed for nothing more than the color of his skin. The city that had always been his home suddenly felt colder. The familiar streets now seemed foreign, hostile, a place where he didn't belong. And then, as Marcus rounded another corner, he saw a police car. The officers were looking directly at him, eyeing him, the same way the man had. Marcus's heart sank. He had been here 100 times before, but now, he was no longer invisible. One of the officers began walking toward him, and Marcus stopped, his chest tight. The officer's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the suspicion in his tone. What are you doing here? The words cut through him like a blade. But this time, Marcus was ready. He lifted his head, eyes filled with a new fire, his voice steady, determined. I'm just walking home. And for the first time in his life, Marcus didn't flinch when the world tried to make him feel small. Marcus's heart was racing. The officer's steps echoed on the pavement as he moved closer, his eyes scanning Marcus with an unnerving intensity. For a moment, Marcus couldn't breathe. His body tensed, frozen, as the officer's gaze seemed to pierce through him, reading him as though he were nothing more than an object to be assessed. His palms grew slick with sweat. He had been here before, in moments where he felt small, invisible. But this was different. This was something darker. The officer stopped a few feet away, and Marcus instinctively took a step back, his throat tightening. The officer didn't seem to notice. What are you doing here? He asked again, his voice calm but chilling. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but his throat felt dry. The words wouldn't come. What could he say? He was tired of explaining himself, tired of justifying his existence. But it didn't matter. The officer was already making his assumptions, already seeing him as a threat. Marcus knew that in this moment, nothing he said would make a difference. It wasn't about the truth. It never had been. I'm just walking home, Marcus managed, his voice shaky but determined. That's it. The officer's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing him, taking in the details, his dark skin, his hoodie, the nervousness in his eyes. Was that enough to make him guilty? Was that all it took? Marcus's chest tightened as he realized that this moment, this simple moment of trying to make his way home, was being twisted into something far more dangerous than it ever should have been. The officer's hand shifted to his belt, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He knew what was coming. The shift, the pull of the gun, the tightening grip of authority. Would he be just another statistic? Another face in the news, reduced to a hashtag, his story twisted and forgotten? Was this how it ended? His mind raced. What if he ran? What if he just ran for it? But he knew better. Running meant guilt in their eyes. And he had seen the videos. He had seen the stories. People like him didn't get second chances when they ran. Hands where I can see them. The officer barked, his tone suddenly sharp. Marcus's breath hitched. His hands instinctively raised, trembling slightly. Would this be it? He could feel the weight of the officer's eyes on him, could feel the tension in the air like a storm waiting to break. His world seemed to shrink, the sounds around him blurring into an indistinct hum. The officer's hand was still near his belt. Why? Why was he so sure of what he was seeing? The officer took a step closer, but Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. His mind screamed, don't move. Don't give him a reason. He was doing everything right, everything he had ever been taught. Stay calm, stay still, stay quiet. But what did it matter when the rules were never the same for him? Then, like a thunderclap in the silence, the officer's radio crackled to life. Unit 3 to 7, we've got a 10 to 4 in progress. Repeat, 10 to 4. Stand by for backup. The officer's posture stiffened. The words hung in the air like a warning. Was this it? Would he just be another mistake in the system? The officer took another step, and Marcus felt a rising panic threaten to swallow him whole. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was a moment in time, a life-defining one. The officer's eyes flicked to his radio, then back to Marcus. A slight shift in the officer's demeanor. Maybe it was hesitation, or maybe it was uncertainty, but something changed. The officer's hand stayed near his belt, but he didn't move it any closer. The silence between them grew unbearable. Marcus's heart beat so loud, he thought it might burst through his chest. Where are you going? The officer asked again, this time softer. He didn't seem to want to engage further, but the weight of his question felt like a trap. Was it really about the walk? Was it about the street, or was it about something else entirely? Was Marcus's skin a threat in itself? I'm just going home, Marcus said again, his voice firmer now, the words carrying the weight of everything he had ever held in. The officer finally looked away, his hand lowering, his gaze drifting towards something else, some far-off thought. But Marcus couldn't breathe. Not yet. The weight of the moment hung in the air between them, and for a second, it felt like everything had stopped. The officer didn't arrest him, didn't make the move to detain him. He just stood there, assessing him as though Marcus's presence alone was enough to warrant this strange, terrifying scrutiny. Marcus turned and walked away, faster now, not waiting for the officer to make another move. His mind was spinning, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Did that really just happen? He felt the eyes on him as he walked, the eyes of everyone around him who had seen, heard, or felt this same fear, this same pain, the same suspicion. He didn't know if the officer would follow him, or if he'd make it home safely, but at that moment he knew one thing for sure, this wasn't just about his walk home anymore. This was about a world that would never see him as equal. As Marcus turned the corner and disappeared from view, the world held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Would this encounter be another scar on a history too long ignored? Or would it spark the change that so many were waiting for? The answer was coming. Marcus made it home that night, but he wasn't the same person who had walked out of his office just a few hours earlier. The fear still lingered in his chest, a tight knot that refused to loosen. His hands shook as he unlocked his door, still hearing the officer's voice echoing in his mind. Was it just a misunderstanding? Was it the officer's actions, or was it something deeper, something rooted in who he was, something he couldn't change? He dropped his bag by the door, staring blankly at the walls of his apartment. The silence felt oppressive, as if the weight of everything that had happened was pressing down on him. He had made it out alive, but how many others didn't? He thought about the countless stories of people who hadn't made it home, people who hadn't been as lucky. His phone buzzed on the counter, but he couldn't bring himself to pick it up. This wasn't just his experience. It was a reality that millions of others lived through every single day. The looks, the assumptions, the fear, the judgment, it was all too familiar. And it wasn't just a bad encounter. It was part of a pattern. A pattern that stretched back for centuries. Marcus wasn't naive. He had always known that racism existed. He had witnessed it in subtle ways, heard it in the whispers, seen it in the sideways glances. But that night, that moment, it had been raw. It wasn't just a look or a comment anymore. It had been a life-threatening moment. He had been reduced to something less than human, simply because of the color of his skin. And what hurt the most wasn't the officer's actions, or even the things that had been said. It was the realization that, for many, this was their reality every single day. He wasn't special for being targeted. He was just another face in a crowd of millions who had been seen as a threat, a suspect, simply because of the way they looked. Marcus thought about his parents, his friends, his brothers and sisters. People he cared about. What if it had been one of them? What if one wrong move, one wrong look, had turned into something far worse? It wasn't just about him anymore. This was about everyone who had ever been judged before they even had a chance to explain themselves, everyone who had been told they didn't belong, simply because of who they were. The weight of that thought was suffocating. But there was something else, something that Marcus couldn't ignore. The rage. It wasn't a blind, violent rage. It was a fire that pushed him forward, a drive to do something, to be something, that would make a difference. It wasn't enough to sit in silence anymore. It wasn't enough to just accept the world as it was. He had been given a voice in that moment, in a way that many never would. He had the power to speak up, to share his experience, to challenge the status quo. And he knew that if he didn't speak, if he didn't take that anger and turn it into action, then he'd be no better than the people who let these injustices continue. The truth was, this wasn't just a story about one man or one police officer. This was the story of generations of people who had been silenced, ignored, or worse, persecuted. It was the story of communities who had been told time and time again that they didn't matter, that their lives were less valuable, that they weren't deserving of the same respect and opportunities as everyone else. But how long can we let this continue? As Marcus sat on his couch that night, the weight of the world heavy on his shoulders, he realized something. The fight for justice wasn't just in the streets, or in the headlines. It was in every conversation, every decision, every small act of defiance against the forces that tried to silence the voices of the marginalized. Marcus had survived the night. He had made it home. But he knew the battle was far from over. His story was just one of many, one that could have ended in tragedy, but instead was a reminder that every life matters, that every voice deserves to be heard, and that change is only possible when we stop turning a blind eye to the injustices happening right in front of us. The question now wasn't whether this was Marcus's story. The question was, when will we stop being silent? How many more people have to suffer before we stand up, before we demand real change? How many more moments like this will we allow to happen before we decide that enough is enough? This isn't just about one person or one night. It's about all of us. And it's time we all start listening.